There are some profound developments going on in Europe. Some are looking to shake things up within the European Union and strive for greater self-sufficiency. Others will be leaving the Union. Still others will have to reconsider climate risk into their capital markets. While Europe becomes more geopolitically aware and independent, to the east of the continent the situation is less amicable. Peace talks are frustratingly slow, new pipelines are coming online, and a strategic arms buildup is destroying the remaining arms control pacts. So let's filter out the noise and look to Europe in 2020. I'm your host Shirvan and welcome to Caspian Report. Working with digital files always carries risks. NordLocker is an app that encrypts your data so you can keep them securely on your computer, cloud, or whenever you're sending files to others. It's one of the easiest apps that I've come across. A simple drag and drop is all it takes to encrypt your documents. No one can access it without your knowledge. NordLocker offers 24/7 support and the first 5 GB is free of charge. Visit nordlocker.net/CaspianReport and use the promo code CaspianReport to get 42% off for the 1-year plan. The main story in Europe is Brexit. With the Conservative Party holding the majority of seats in the House of Commons, the British Parliament will formally approve the Brexit deal. Under the terms of the exit agreement, the United Kingdom will leave the European Union but remain in its single market for the rest of the year. This will ease economic disruptions for international businesses, and to preserve their newly acquainted trade relationship, lawmakers in London and Brussels will start negotiating for a replacement free trade agreement. The talks will be complicated. The European Union has a trade surplus with the United Kingdom in goods, but a trade deficit in services. So while Brussels will push for British industries to follow the norms and regulations of the single market, London will seek to develop its own regulations. In the post-Brexit world, the point of contention will be which goods and services will be included in the free trade agreement between the European Union and the United Kingdom. Now, free trade deals are notoriously difficult to negotiate, and it will probably not be signed by the end of Brexit's implementation period in December. Without a free trade agreement, Brussels and London would have to trade under the tariffs of the World Trade Organization by 2021. Neither side wants this because it would make trade more expensive. To avoid trading under the WTO, the UK and the EU can either extend the Brexit implementation period into 2021 or agree on a limited free trade agreement that covers the most critical sectors. London will also be negotiating with Washington for a similar free trade agreement, but again, due to the complexity, it will also last beyond 2020. Regardless of how future trade agreements are resolved, Brexit has shaken the United Kingdom to its core. The relationship between England, Scotland, Northern Ireland, and even Wales will be on table this year. This doesn't imply that the UK will collapse, but it is possible that a crisis of confidence takes hold in the country. In continental Europe, low GDP growth in Germany is likely to divide the coalition government. The Social Democratic Party will argue for higher public spending, while the Christian Democratic Union will seek a balanced budget policy. Divisions over fiscal policy will prevent Berlin from carrying out a large stimulus package to boost domestic consumption. Germany will also be taking over the rotating EU presidency in the coming year. With most of the European Union preoccupied with finalizing Brexit, Germany and France will have the opportunity to lead the European Union towards greater self-sufficiency in areas like foreign policy, defense, and finance. In 2020, the Union will take steps towards breaking down cross-border barriers to military trade and technological developments. Lawmakers in Berlin and Paris will still face opposition from the other European member states, but 2020 presents an exceptional year for the EU to chart its own course in foreign and trade policy. In Italy, the coalition government will be constantly on the risk of collapse due to conflicting ideologies and policy goals. As such, lawmakers in Rome will have difficulty to implement reforms to resolve the country's economic complications such as high budget deficit, massive debt levels, low GDP growth, etc. In other words, most of Italy's structural economic complications will remain unresolved. And this way of affairs goes for many other European nations as well. Also in 2020, delegations from all over the world will gather to check on their progress under the Paris Agreement on climate change. Little progress has thus far been made, which will renew international attention to the cause and increase civilian activism. The number of climate risk lawsuits against governments and corporations is also likely to increase in Western Europe, forcing companies to price climate risk into credit decisions and capital markets. As climate change takes a bigger role in the conversation, lawmakers will have to rethink their policies with elections in mind. And elections are plentiful this year. The United Kingdom and France will hold local elections, while Poland, Belarus and Moldova will elect new heads of state. In Azerbaijan and Georgia, parliamentary elections will be held while the Greek parliament will choose the country's next president. So there's a lot of political maneuvering ahead. To the east of the continent, things get more exciting. No less than 4 pipelines are expected to come online this year, all adding to Russia's capacity for natural exports to Europe. The first is the Nord Stream 2 across the Baltic Sea, which will expand the Nord Stream pipeline capacity from 55 billion cubic meters to 110 billion cubic meters. The second and third pipelines are the Parallel Brotherhood and Soyuz, which have a combined capacity of 140 billion cubic meters and go through Ukraine to European consumers. The final pipeline is the Turk Stream in the Black Sea, which is comprised of 2 separate pipelines designed to carry up to 16 billion cubic meters each. One of the pipelines will supply the Turkish domestic market, while the other will send natural gas through Turkey to Europe. Beyond pipeline politics, the crisis in Ukraine will remain the most volatile strife in Europe. Officials in Kiev and Moscow will fail to achieve progress in the peace talks over the state of Donbas. The Minsk agreement, which outlines a roadmap to end Ukraine's conflict, calls for the reintegration of the separatist-occupied territories into Ukraine in exchange for autonomy or quasi-self-rule. Ukrainian President Zelensky has been negotiating with Putin, Macron and Merkel, but the core issue is that Russia denies being a party to the conflict. The Kremlin insists that the Ukrainians should negotiate with the separatist leaders of Donbas. Frustration is building up in Kiev and Moscow at the lack of a diplomatic breakthrough, and if the tensions persist or increase, they could roll back the progress made thus far and destabilize the front line in eastern Ukraine. Whatever happens, the United States will sustain the sanctions against the Russian Federation. The sanctions targeting Russian arms sales and the Nord Stream 2 pipeline to Germany could delay some of Moscow's economic reforms. GDP growth will therefore remain low in 2020 in Russia. Social unrest is also expected to increase as the standard of living has been dropping. Currently, some 21 million Russians live below the poverty line, and the number of bankruptcies among Russian businesses increased by 57% in 2019 compared to the year before. Much of this is due to the Western sanctions and falling oil prices over the past 5 years. President Putin's government took these macro indications as a cue to shake things up. Last week, just after delivering his annual State of the Nation address, Putin proposed new measures to boost social assistance as well as crucial constitutional amendments, while Prime Minister Medvedev and his cabinet resigned. 2021 is election year for the State Duma, and the government's resignation is designed to help Putin secure the best possible result for his party. So in preparation for the next parliamentary elections, Putin is likely to boost spending in 2020. Also consequential are Putin's proposed constitutional amendments. Based on the current constitution, he won't be allowed to run for re-election after his current term ends. Some believe that the president could seek to extend term limits, but a more subtle way to go about is for Putin to amend the constitution where the nomination of prime minister and cabinet is transferred from president to parliament. This would grant Putin a long-term strategy to stay in power beyond 2024. Either way, discussions on Russia's constitutional amendments will be a big part of 2020. Russia is also likely to cultivate economic relations with unusual markets. Think of arms sales to Saudi Arabia, mining operations in Argentina, and so on. One relationship, however, will eclipse others: Russia's business dealings with China. The two have a common enemy in the United States, so it makes sense that they deepen their cooperation. Through trade, Moscow and Beijing will want to reduce their dependence on Western markets. That said, it's a relationship that is in China's favor. So the Russians will move ahead in 2020, but with caution, not committing themselves to any long-term project. As for Russia's relationship with the United States, the most pressing issue will be the dismantling of the nuclear arms control. No new agreement is anywhere close to replace or extend the New START treaty. With Russia's strategic arms buildup and the exclusion of China in the existing protocols, sustaining the existing arms control treaties is of little value to Washington. Plus, the development of new strategic arms technologies, such as hypersonic missiles, fall outside the definitions in the current treaties. With so many variables to consider, the value of existing agreements will decay over the year. And as we enter a new nuclear age, 2019 and 2020 will be remembered as the point of no return. Altogether, the epilogue of Brexit, self-sufficiency in the EU, climate risk, the Ukrainian peace talks, and Russia's constitutional amendments are just some of the trends to watch for in Europe's geopolitical environment for 2020. I've been your host Shirvan from Caspian Report. If you enjoy our content, please consider supporting us through Patreon or the YouTube membership program. Thank you for watching, and Sahol.